What's good, everybody? My name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today we are going to be taking a look at Bitwig's Spectral Effects Suite that is available to everyone with an upgrade plan as the recent 4.4 update. These things are pretty awesome. They're a little bit strange and obscure, but that's part of the good thing because we don't need necessarily another chorus. We need some stuff that is going to be, challenging our sound design in different ways, at least as far as I'm concerned. So right off the bat, these are containers. And what they do is they allow you to use conventional effects in ways that attenuate or look at specific areas of the sound. So it could be through transients, it could be through harmonics, it could be through loud and quiet parts of the sound, etc. But what's really neat about this is that as opposed to being like, oh, well, I'm going to apply, distortion only to the lows, I'm going to apply a chorus only to the highs or the mids or something, this kind of throws all that out the window and allows you to kind of I guess process the sounds in ways that you normally wouldn't. And because they're just effects containers in general, that means that you can use any of your effects, and that means that we're going to get some really cool stuff today. So before we get started, if you guys are interested in this kind of stuff, or you like weird, crazy sound design, especially from Bitwig, I'd encourage you to like the video, maybe subscribe or something, because this is pretty much what we do here. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at our first example. My favorite out of this actually is the Transient Split, and I am just going to play this drum loop. Now when you first turn this on, and this is the same across all of these, like it's not going to do anything. So you want to make sure to throw some effects in here. However, as far as like the architecture of these go, they're going to be kind of thematic in a lot of different ways. It's like you generally have like a different way to split each, I guess, like band or like compartment to where you can apply effects inside of these containers. So even if you only watch this specific part of the video, you're going to be able to take this information and pretty much apply it to all of these. Now, what this basically means is that for this in particular, the transients and tones are where you can apply effects to. So if you apply effects to the transients, that means it's going to focus on the loudest part of the sound, the very beginning, right? Things that bump or hit and have some kind of processing to that. So I've got the snap heap rack for one of these generators that I make a lot on the channel. You guys can check that on my website if you're interested, but it sounds like this. Now, for this stuff over here on the left side of the window, there's a few things that we can do. For one, this stuff can focus on either the tones or the transient side of things. So let's go ahead and see how that changes the sound. So you can see that this will kind of like help you focus on specific things if you want to kind of like tune things out. The decay will allow you to kind of adjust the release of the actual effect that's being applied. So a shorter decay is going to make it very short, obviously, and a longer decay is going to let some of this stuff ring out. And then the smoothing is pretty much what it says, because it'll kind of smooth everything out. Now the last thing that we have here is the tilt, and pretty much what this does is like think of it like a scale. You can either boost the low frequencies and dip the high frequencies, or the opposite where you can boost the high frequencies and dip the low frequencies. However, if you look over here, there is actually a different kind of tilt mode on here, which is contour. It's actually already activated. So I believe that this says that it focuses on the mids, I want to say. And by the way, if you are confused about any of this stuff, you can look at all the help things on here. Kudos to you, Bitwig. But it says that this can work subtly on the mids, raising the highs and lows together. So I would definitely like come into this and play with it, but it's not really going to be something that is so significant that you're going to immediately be able to identify with your ears, like something so obvious like a phaser or a chorus, right? Or even distortion. These are things that in a good way, you're going to have to kind of like mess with and experiment to see how they sound and just find something cool. And that's going to be kind of the theme across the entire board with all these effects is you never really know what you're going to get. At least I don't really know what I'm going to get until I've actually had some time where I send specific effects in there, but that's part of it, is it's really fun to play with. So that's it for this one. I guess for this, you can change between whether or not you want to identify between the transients and a spectrogram, which is actually nice. It might be nice to actually just throw this on your master or something and just kind of see what's going on and make sure that your transients are hitting right or whatever. But I would actually like this as a standalone device because I like spectrograms and there's not very many on the market for Mac. So next up we have the frequency split. And this one is probably my least favorite, even though it's pretty cool. It just doesn't cater towards like my specific character of sound. This one pretty much focuses on 4 different frequency bands, or up to 4 different frequency bands that you can apply effects to. So with this in particular, I just have a basic saw wave. And what we're going to do with this is turn all of these off because I don't want to give it away just yet. But on here, we've got the splits, which basically means how many frequency splits you're going to be able to drag this into. It's almost like a quality factor in some cases. If I were to play this, let's go ahead and turn all of these off. And okay, I was hoping that it would just bypass it or whatever, but if you take a look at what's happening here, you can see that this is only this specific frequency range, and whenever you start to mess with the splits, it's going to divvy it up into several other things, kind of like so. So within this, on here, you can focus on frequencies over on the left, you can focus on frequencies in the middle, and then you can focus on frequencies on the right. And then this is a crossover that you have that allows you to kind of mesh all of the effect processing that you have in between. When you nudge stuff, it kind of is like a bias to where you can kind of force, like, let's say everything is baseline here, you can kind of force everything to kind of go more towards the second or first. And then if you nudge it in a minus way, it'll kind of push everything more towards the third and the fourth. So with that, let's just go ahead and see what we have on these bands. This one is a snap heap rack. Sorry, where's that? That's over here in the middle. We're just going to turn that off for now. But we've got some basic stuff, filtering, distortion, and chorus, and it sounds like this. You can use this little XY knob to kind of move this around. You can see that that's making these two bend here. And I think that people that are into like the color bass or like really heavy rhythm and stuff are going to love this stuff just because of what you can do as far as like getting that squelchy kind of sound. But in that manner, you can see that there's this little L here, and that's that limiter that we have turned on. So if it's too loud for whatever reason, you can kind of set everything to a baseline in that manner and mess with it in that way. Finally, within all of this stuff, obviously you can kind of crossfade if you want. And then you also have your pre and post effects, which is on all of these. And that's pretty much it for this in particular. Now, what is really cool though, just for a means of making stuff that sounds interesting, is let's go ahead and throw a different rack in here, which is the aberration generator. And let's go ahead and take a listen to what this sounds when everything is activated. It's just really interesting to listen to because this will kind of like, you just never know what you're going to get, even though it all kind of sounds lasery. It's a lot of fun to mess around with that. The spin, I didn't adjust this, but the spin will kind of nudge everything, I guess, and not nudge, but it'll kind of like rotate. But within this, what is really interesting is that on all of these, you can automate almost everything in here. So if I were to click on this, you can automate this, you can automate this, you can automate this, 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 and this. And so when you turn this on and you actually let this run, that's when things get really interesting. It's almost like kind of like vocody in such a way, and that's really interesting in some cases. And I would say that, you know, you could set up something in here and then process this on the outside with distortion and get more varied results. But the thing with the frequency split is that it all still kind of sounds lasery because you're just dealing with frequencies in that way. Even still though, it's a nice addition, and I'm sure that some people are going to love that, but I highly encourage you to just experiment and see what else you can find with it. So next up, now we have a respace, and this is the harmonic split. So with this, you've got a low and high, and this is going to say like, all right, well, everything below, you know, 80 Hertz is kind of where this is going to be used to define your fundamental, which we have here. This is kind of the stuff that you have in the middle, and this is stuff that you have in the high end, but this doesn't really matter except for if you're using this on the fundamental. Now with this split, you have a harmonic division, or like a harmonic separation. So every second means that what goes up here is going to be your first, third, and your fifth, and then this is going to be everything that's not your first, third, and fifth. And then this stuff that's in the nons is going to be anything that like is kind of unidentifiable, right? It doesn't really have a tone. So if I were to turn all this stuff off and you were to listen to it, it doesn't really have a detectable pitch. It does a little bit, but it's not going to be perfect. But this tries to take everything that just sounds kind of like noise or is quote unquote atonal, whereas this stuff is actually focusing on specific harmonics. So within that, again, you have the same idea about your tilts. You have a threshold here to where you can set it to automatic, or you can set this to be specifically here. So, you know, anything that is above this is not really, anything that's going to be below this is not going to be affected. So usually I just set it on automatic, and then you can adjust this how you want to. But whenever you start messing with this stuff, what's really interesting about it is that you can get some really interesting results just from focusing on those harmonics in general. We don't have anything crazy on here, but I wanted to actually accentuate like the detuning of this, because I thought that was pretty interesting whenever I put this on here about like how you're getting some really crazy, and again, almost like vocoded things on here. But the challenge with this that you are going to find is to make sure that you have a clean fundamental for one, but also, you know, mess around with this knob here to where you can focus on all the way up to every 24th, because it will change the sound in some way. And again, you know, I particularly like this kind of stuff because it's just a lot of fun to just stack racks on. So even if I were to use something that would be somewhat like the generator stuff that I did, but exclusively within Bitwig, we can grab like an effects layer, and this would be on here. So I've got all of these that we can kind of try out. This would be like a filter rack or something. Yeah, lots of stuff. Great. And this is from the Aegis pack on my website, but you can make your own and just kind of have fun with it. And you know, you never know what you're going to get. Let's try it on this one. Crazy. So what would this look like if we put something on both of these? And maybe I just change the preset on this to, I don't know, say disintegration generator. Turn the mix on and let's see what that sounds like. Now, interestingly, it seems like actually the loudest part of this sound is the non-harmonics. So let's go ahead and do another one. Big ups for having a decent computer that can keep up with this stuff. But we can kind of just like stack insane effect racks on here on each thing and just mess around and see what comes out of it. Whoa. That's pretty insane. So one thing to keep in mind is you definitely want to mess around with these and stuff to kind of just see how this is going to change and whatnot. But, you know, on this, I noticed that it sounded really cool, but it was all pretty much low and mids. So I wonder if maybe changing the tilts on this or something, we could actually get more high frequencies. There we go. Now that actually sounds like the higher quality stuff, or the brighter sounds are able to kind of ring through a little bit more. So the other crazy thing, just, you know, so that way we're all on the same page, is that I'm only using one instance of this. And so imagine what would happen if you did like 2 of these. Now I'm going to turn this down because I don't know what's going to happen, but this is part of the fun of how you can get into some crazy sound design, right? So let's see what happens on this. Or what happens if you start to, again, of course, like, you know, start to change the harmonic split to a transient split or to a frequency split. And that's what I want everybody to be aware of, is it's like, it's not just one device. It's the fact that you can stack stuff. Like the power of effect racks is really where the technology is today, at least in my opinion. And that's why I love things like Bitwig. I love things like, you know, kilohearts and stuff, is that you can just continue to stack to your CPU's, you know, limit. And from that, you know, taking this as a base device and saying, okay, well, here's the concept of it, and then here's how we can, you know, take this and make it into like insane, crazy stuff, is hopefully what you're going to take out of this video. So there's that. Let's go ahead into our last example, which is the loud split. And this in particular is kind of like, well, it's almost like self-explanatory. You have your loud sounds, you've got your, I guess, kind of semi-loud sounds, and then you have your more quiet sounds. The tilt function is still the same. So the rise function is, again, how long it takes to get to the loud sounds, and then the fall is how long it takes to get to the quiet sounds. But the stuff within this is pretty much still the same. So on this one, I think that I just copied the detune respace and just something kind of like this. And this one I already went ahead and applied effects to. But as you can see, you've got your loud, your mids, and your quiet sounds that you can adjust here. If you tilt it, you can kind of even it out a bit. But this is really cool because, like, if you automate or you modulate the tilts, right, then you're pretty much like crossfading between effects, and that's something that I think is really interesting. It's not really about, for the sake of experimentation, it's not about like keeping like a sound like so like, you know, everything is in mono or whatever. This is more of just like how to get more varied results. But the fact that you can kind of cross in between that, so just take a look at the spectrum here. So I guess nothing really gets that loud even when you tilt in that way. But what I do think is interesting is that you can of course adjust this to where, you know, let's say it's not getting that loud. Now everything is in the loud, and now you can adjust everything to quiet. So maybe finding kind of like a nice balance in between the two would be why that would be so significant. But again, you can grab one of these or something and apply this to the tilt. You can also apply these here as well. So what that means is you are going to see these move, not necessarily the red and green bars, but you can actually move these to where like this is going to crossfade in between effects in that way based off of how loud the sound is. And this is like, in practicality, this is kind of hard to explain the significance of it because we haven't really had enough time with it. We haven't really been able to like see its potential. But at the same time, it's really cool because this is a new way of looking at processing sound, in the same way that, you know, when we all figured out how to do frequency splitting, right? To which Bitwig has their own frequency splitter as well. That was one of the big things that I was like, oh, this is so dope. So within that, take a listen to how this sounds now. Maybe we can set this on bipolar. And these effects, to be honest, aren't really that crazy. One thing that is cool within this is you can definitely add like an OTT to this. So depending on your loud and quiet sounds or something, like if you've got really quiet highs or something, you can like boost that on there or something. But again, when you start to, you know, apply this, and again, this is how I would use this in my way. When you start to apply this in such a way of adding different kinds of effect processors and stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and turn these off now. I mean, take a listen to the kind of stuff that you can get from this. So that all sounds fine and dandy, but what happens when you start to get creative and you use all of your tools together in such a way that, you know, everything kind of starts to come together of like all of your crazy effect processing stuff that you have, right? That's where things get really interesting, because then it's like, oh man, now what's going to happen? Let's go ahead and try to see if we can create something interesting with this. And maybe we can even throw something. Okay, we've got something. Do we have something on the loud as well? We do. Now let's go ahead and grab this guy and throw that on there too. And again, like, I'm not really worried about what comes out of this, whether or not it's cool. It's more of just like, hey, this is how I experiment, and this is how I would hope that you all would as well. I'm gonna throw this over here at the end. All right, we broke it. But maybe we can do like one at a time or so. So yeah, spectral effects, am I right? Pretty sick. I would definitely encourage everybody to go experiment with it. You don't need these racks, you don't need anything crazy, and there's actually a lot of other practical uses, especially within mixing, that you can use these for. But for somebody like me who tries to, you know, look at something of like, all right, what are the mechanics of this, and then how do I break it there's a lot of room for experimentation here that I will be most likely using in my future tunes and future packs and blah, 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 and all that other stuff. So hopefully this gives you enough to kind of have, an understanding of what these do, but also more importantly, an understanding about how to experiment with them and how to use them in a way that will be different, unique, and inspiring to you as a sound designer, as to somebody who just wants to experiment, even if you're not that well versed in sound design. So yeah, thanks guys. Like the video if you can. Let me know your thoughts about how you feel about the spectral effects, and I will see you in the next one.